Welcome to Vision Pros, the show all about spatial computing, visionOS, and getting work done on the Apple Vision Pro. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
I think Mahjong, it struck this beautiful balance of it's a really compelling, deep multiplayer game, and it's really three-dimensional. Cards are 2D in a way. They're flat. Right. Mahjong tiles are truly three-dimensional, and so there was something just beautiful and mesmerizing about the tiles themselves that really spoke to me. And then the more I learned about the game, the more my mind was blown. I was just like, oh my god, this is such a deep game.
Welcome to another episode of Vision Pros. My guest today is Ethan Sherbondy. Ethan is developer of Mahjong Space and is at work on several other visionOS apps. Mahjong Space was built with Spatial Personas in mind and is an amazing title to add to your visionOS app library if you're looking for more Spatial Persona games. The bulk of this episode was recorded before Apple surprise released Spatial Personas, but as you'll hear later, we were able to record a special segment about Spatial Personas after Apple released that feature as a part of visionOS 1.1 kind of server side. We cover a ton of ground in this episode, including the community aspect of developing for visionOS. Ethan is currently at VisionDevCamp, where he's recording this episode, and attended both GDC and did a month-long residency with other visionOS developers, where he was able to collaborate with other developers during that launch month of this new platform. As a reminder, you can support this podcast over at visionpros.fm/Patreon. By supporting either the Patreon or subscribing to Apple Podcast, you'll get both Vision Pros and iPad Pros early. Even $1 a month on Patreon goes a long way in helping with the production of this podcast, and your support is greatly appreciated. With that, here's my interview with Ethan. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Ethan.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for stepping out from, you're at VisionDevCamp right now, and we'll have to chat a bit about what's going on there and some of the different things you've been to recently, but thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, long-time listener, first-time caller. I think I emailed you something along those lines.
Yeah. So first, before we dive into too much, I'm just curious on your background and why you're excited to jump into visionOS at version 1. Yeah.
So I think it's been quite an adventure. My background's in software development. Kind of got into this world as a kid, as many folks do, wanting to create my own video games.
Yeah.
Was playing Pokemon and, up to various shenanigans with my brothers. And, the moment I realized, this is a thing that I could maybe do, kind of dove headfirst into that space, started making my own riffs off of, Nintendo titles and RPGs that I would play as a kid. And then it really just snowballed from there. Started getting into web development. In the golden age of Tumblr, was a bit involved in that world. Did some mobile stuff. Actually, the first iOS app I released as a 16-year-old was a music player for Tumblr.
Okay.
So it was called Listener. It would take your kind of the list of Tumblogs that you follow, and everyone was posting bootlegged MP3s back in the day, and then just kind of roll it up into a music player and a streaming experience. That was a blast. And then have been doing development work ever since. Worked at different kind of scales of startups, did fun internships out here in the Bay Area. The first one was at this company called Bump, which was the
Contact, the thing that Android or Google bought, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so my understanding is a lot of the original Bump team went on to help seed the Google Photos team at Google, which is really, really great. They were really going deep into the photo sharing space, kind of in the latter arc of their startup journey. But that was a blast, first time out here in the Bay Area, doing iOS development work, doing web dev stuff. That kind of parlayed into another internship out here at Apple, where I got to be part of the Pro Apps team for a summer, working on Final Cut. That was a very formative experience. But all of this, helped me kind of build understanding and some confidence going out on my own and doing development work. So feel very lucky to have had those experiences. Maybe fast forwarding a bit.
Before you fast forward a bit,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
curious.
we can
The bump days. Was
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
around the same time WebOS had the pre-3 and the tablet
Oh,
where
yeah.
you could tap them and they'd share stuff
Yeah.
across? Because that was such a pleasant interaction. I had the pre-3
Absolutely.
and the Veer and the touchpad and the bumping that stuff across was just delightful.
Yeah, the pre, like what Palm was doing is really, really interesting. I remember fondly, like a friend in high school, everyone was hyped about the iPhone, and a close friend of mine, he had the original pre, and I was like, this is really cool, actually. Like WebOS was remarkable. And maybe it's not surprising that that project has lived on. Like that is enduring technology, actually. I mean, it's weird that it's in televisions today.
Yeah,
but,
it's very weird. Yeah, when they announced everything's going out of business, I still have a unopened Veer and a pre-3 I imported from Europe that's unopened in the box. Sadly, It's not like the iPhone where those are going for a crap ton. Those original iPhones, not quite the same situation with Palm devices.
Yeah, but they really had something interesting going.
They did. It was such a pleasant and I wish that they were still around as the third a triopoly instead of this duopoly, because they were so it was just a fun time with that stuff. Anyways,
yeah, maybe the marketplace would be better off. But yeah, I mean, this is always the challenge and the conundrum. Like, sometimes you're too early to an idea. And WebOS, like, we kind of got back there with Chromebooks and progressive web applications to some extent, all that stuff. Jump
ahead. So
okay,
modern days. So headsets in general.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been? You mentioned playing video games and wanting to make your own video games. The initial push for headsets has always been great for video games, great for entertainment. Did you get into the early headsets and looking into potentially developing for those?
Yeah, so right out of college, this was back in 2014, was doing my first job, which was for me a pretty short-lived stint, but a very interesting one at this company called Formlabs. So they were in the 3D printing space, and like kind of one of my first paychecks that I got as an adult was I ended up spending it on like the DK2. Was DK2 still a Kickstarter? Like
I'm not sure.
I don't even remember.
Knowledge of the early Oculus stuff is very hazy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, somehow managed to get a hold of a DK2, and that was a mind-blowing experience at the time. I mean, just doing like some of these early demo apps. It was literally a developer kit. Yeah. And I was like, there is definitely something here. This is nuts. But I kind of set that aside for a bit. I think, this is kind of a personal challenge for me, like in my adult life, like this tension of doing fun things, and doing things that seem pragmatic. I think a lot of us struggle with this, right? And I think at the time I was just like, this is so cool, but I think I got to shelf this for now. Like, I'm just not there in my life where I can like make this a thing.
Yeah, it's funny with the older headsets. Like my experience is mainly with PlayStation. So after getting the PSVR 2, I pulled out my original PSVR 1 and played some games. Like, oh, those screens were just like so much worse. Yeah, and now that I have Apple Vision Pro, I put on PSVR 2, which has 2K per eye screens, and when I used it before Apple Vision Pro, it's like, oh my god, this is amazing. This HDR screen, I'm getting blinded by the sun. Now I put it on, it's like, this is very it's very pixelated. It feels just bad, even though it's a great screen for that price point. And once you're inside a game, at least with PSVR 2, it does a pretty good job still. But like if you're at that just PlayStation launch screen where you're looking at your home screen, it just after Apple Vision, it's like, oh god, this is not good.
Yeah, and that's a great sign in terms of an arc of technology, like that you want to be part of.
Right.
That's that's the thing you want. Like,
exponential improvement. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So kind of checked out of that ecosystem for a bit. Got very excited when the Vive rolled around. Like the room scale, the pitch of a room scale VR experience was very compelling for me. Never actually owned one, but like I got so enthralled with it. I became part of this group going around college campuses and like demoing the Vive. Like that was the thing they were doing at the time, just like doing a demo fair, roadshow sort of thing. And I like part of why I did that, I was like, I'll probably never get to own this thing. Like it's a huge pain to set up. Like I don't have the space for this. But while doing the demos, I fell in love with Tilt Brush, and there was this underwater experience where you would see like a giant blue whale. I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. And I was like, okay, this is getting a lot better really fast.
Yeah, the Vive is such an interesting product because they've never updated it. And it launched as a super high-end thing, but it's just kind of like sat there for like 5 whatever years, and like it's so curious. And the price point I think has been pretty stagnant. It's like, so I guess if you got it on day one, you got your money's worth. But it's
yeah. I mean, gotten a lot of mileage out of it, hopefully. But yeah, the beacon-based setup is, I mean, it allowed for a lot of precision, and I think it was like the great solution at the time.
Right, with external stuff tracking you that are scattered throughout the room, so you can move around freely. I think I forget if that was wired or wireless, if you were tethered to the PC or not.
Yeah, I think you were still tethered to the PC.
Okay, yeah.
So it's a lot of wires.
Yeah, which, I mean, PlayStation does it in that approach, and I like not having to deal with a battery in that regard. And if the cable's super long, not a huge deal, but I'm sure completely wireless would be nice one day with that stuff.
Yeah. And then I think like a lot of folks, so, you know, I was absolutely in love with that experience, but not the like the pragmatic aspect of setting it up.
Yes.
And actually living that, you know?
Yeah.
So kind of.
Yeah, and the inside out tracking is so game changing with PSVR 2, and Quest is doing that now, and Apple Vision Pros, we know. It's just such a difference not having to deal with a camera. Like with PlayStation VR 1, it had the camera that track you. And occasionally it's like, why is my tracking all messed up? And I take the headset, I glance up. Oh, my cat's like taking a nap in front of the camera kind of deal.
Oh, no. Yeah. So we really have come a long way from those days. And yeah, started getting back into it in earnest. I think like many people did during the pandemic. The launch of the Quest 2, I think, was a really landmark moment for this ecosystem.
Yeah, because they drove the price point down so low, right?
Yeah. And I think to this day, right, you know, they're still selling Quest 2s.
Yeah, they're on fire sale for like $200. I think the rumor is they're going to release a Quest 3 Lite with the same CPU and GPU as the Quest 3, but with the lower quality screen for the Quest 2.
Yeah.
Which is a brilliant move to have that, because the processor in the Quest 2 is garbage these days, but the Quest 3 is pretty decent, so it'll be nice to... Yeah, for that approach to play out. Yep.
Yeah, and it was a very memorable experience for me during the pandemic to like get to play table tennis with my brothers. Like I think it's like often, you know, the most mundane of things that really get to you. And in a way, it's not surprising, you know, like Pong was the first breakout success in the classic video gaming era. And we had our Pong moment again, you know, with table tennis in VR. But that was really special for me. And I think it helped establish the value of social presence. Because a lot of those other experiences I had in VR up until that point, you know, it's really just about like, oh, I'm immersed, you know. But this was like, oh, I'm talking to my family. Like I'm staying in touch with my family across the ocean in the middle of this global pandemic. And that really meant a lot at the time.
Walkabout mini golf is another great just social hangout game. So many inventive courses, and you just play putt-putt with your friends. It's brilliant. Yeah, it's
delightful. Yeah. And so, you know, that I think that at least as a consumer, that's when I really started tuning in. I think like a lot of folks. And then the announcement of the Vision Pro was just, you know, that's like Christmas morning, or my family's Jewish, so what I imagine Christmas morning to feel like. Yeah.
And so visionOS, it's an interesting kind of platform because you've been an iOS developer, so it's taking that knowledge and letting you create both these flat 2D apps, plus you do have now the option of working with fully 3D immersive stuff. You have volumetrics and different app types, and you can be... The creativity as far as what your app is capable of is really far reaching, because like you can combine like 2D with 3D. Like there's this awesome 79-cent zoo app which has a 2D kind of browse the zoo and learn about the animals, and you hit a button, and then that tiger is like a 3D shape that you can just place on your desk kind of thing. So you can combine elements of 2D and 3D in a single app, and it's integrated into your own view of the world, which is it's so different from being totally immersed in stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and I think this was a really interesting strategic choice on, I think they've done so many things to kind of stand as a counterpoint to what has been normative in the VR space so far, right? And it goes it runs deep, right? The marketing, the fact that they call it spatial computing,
no hand controllers, it's all hand tracking instead.
Yep, pass through as the first thing you experience when you enter it.
Yeah.
All of these sort of design decisions, I'm sure they're very deliberate choices, And
have you experienced a crash on your Apple Vision Pro yet?
I have.
I'm blown away with the crash experience. Even when the system hard crashes and all your apps close down, the camera remains active. It is active. You see the Apple logo again, but the camera stays on, even if your OS hard crashes and it reboots. It does like a soft reboot type thing. It's wild.
Yeah, the R1 is the real deal. I think that was a genius move on their part.
So that's what you think is enabling. If a hard crash happens, the M chip is the thing that crashes, and the R chip is active and keeping that camera feed going. In your mind,
I mean, something along those lines.
It makes sense to me.
The specifics,
yeah. So when visionOS was announced, you immediately dove into the SDK and started seeing what you could create in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was very avidly tuned into WWDC. I remember that week my wife was kind of yelling at me because she's like, "Oh, I was in Singapore," So I think time zone wise, when they were dropping the content, it was maybe it was 3 a.m. or something. And she's like, "What are you doing? Why are you up at 3 a.m?" I'm like, "I have to watch these developer videos. You don't." Just give me this one,
exactly.
It's okay.
It's like a holiday.
Yeah. So, that was a fun week of very little sleep. But I was just so excited. Really, it's every single one of those videos was just a gift to get to watch those and learn kind of about how they were thinking about this new platform. And they usually refer to it as this platform,
Right.
They wouldn't say the name of the device because I guess a lot of them didn't know the name of the device.
They didn't know yet,
weren't allowed to say if they didn't know.
That was a very fun day. And I'll always remember June 5th because that's my birthday. So Apple Vision Pro announced my birthday, which is a fun kind of thing.
Yeah, also a June baby, but on the solstice over here. At least. Yeah.
So we're now we're now a good 2 months into visionOS. Almost 60 days here as we record this. So what are your just general feelings about the device and platform as a whole 2 months in here? Yeah,
I'm not the first person to say this. I won't be the last. I think it's an amazing developer kit.
Okay. You don't think it's ready for most consumers, is in your mind? I mean, just from a price point perspective, probably is part of it.
Yeah. I think they made a lot of hardware trade-offs to get this out the door. There's a lot of work to do on the software side. It's an incredible device. It's a very expensive device.
Yes.
And I can't wait for the next one. I think that's where a lot of us are at. Where there are certain use cases that are just mind-blowingly good, but it is hard to heartily recommend it to a friend who is not.
You have to look at their calendar and see what their lifestyle is like. It's are you going to be alone in a chair for a couple hours a night where you could watch movies on it? Then then it's totally worth it as a thing. Or do you want to get work done in it and want to have the trade-offs that comes with that kind of thing?
Yeah. I think there are these magical experiences. Yeah, and if you're say you're living alone, or you just don't have room for a television in your home, or you spend a lot of time on airplanes, or it's really hard to just find a space to focus and work and tune out the world, like the whole earphones for your eyes. Like, I think that's a very real thing. It's amazing. Like, I've been able to do these great super focused coding sessions in there, and it has been truly delightful. I could totally see if someone is like a writer or video editor, or, you know, just really wants to like carve out those like a 1 hour chunk of time and really just like get in the zone. It can be amazing for that. But all that said, you know, it's a pound on your face, more than a pound on your face. It's the battery life without it being plugged in is 2 hours or so.
Yeah. If I'm away from a power outlet, I'm basically daisy chaining my battery to a humongous, you know, other battery. It's like a double battery setup. Yeah.
Yeah, and it would be the most expensive computer that most people would own.
Yeah, it was for me
at this moment.
Prior to that, my college computer was the most expensive computer. It was $3,200 for the 17-inch MacBook Pro at the time. That was my college computer. Machines. Loved that thing. And that felt like a lot at the time, which it was. But yeah, now I've topped that, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that kind of the way I try to sum this up is like there are a lot of halvings and doublings that need to happen over the next.
I want the camera technology to double, like low light performance on the cameras, and you know, make the cameras as expensive as possible that will fit in that form factor, because that in itself will improve the experience, you know, tenfold. Like they're great. I mean, the perspective and matching and all that, but there's a lot of improvements that could be done there, I think.
Yep. And, you know, I think the price needs to half for most people. I think the weight needs to half for most people.
Agreed. Yeah. Because, you really need, in my mind, you need to modify with a third party. I use a top band by a third party that kind of covers it's this company out of New Zealand. I'll put in the notes and I can send a link to you.
Okay, cool.
I love it. It's like a $25 type thing, but the only downside with that one is it covers the speaker pods. So basically, I have to use I've used the AirPods if I'm watching movies and stuff in it.
I gotcha.
And it's fine for just generally using it and music playback at low volumes. But once you want to do it, then that's where you need the AirPods.
I am so excited and actively on the lookout for any third-party, you know, like case manufacturer doing facial interface stuff to have a heyday with this device. Because I think Apple made a lot of compromises in the name of aesthetics, which maybe was the right move, you know, from like just getting this off the ground, marketing, public perception. Like I could totally buy that strategically, all things considered, that was like a good call. But as a user,
I really want others to make headbands that directly go into that little slot. Like, it seems like people could do that, and I'd love to see what they come up with for that.
It's the most modular Apple device that they've shipped in years.
Yeah, magnetic light seals and the cushion and the headband is and the weight becomes much less of an issue if the headband's proper. I mean, if it's good,
good distribution. Yeah. Trade-offs abound, but I'm always on the lookout these days. Yeah, we got to give them time. It's been 2 months. You know, hopefully there weren't that many supply chain leaks and
the price is another thing. Like, will the resale price be enough where I'll want to get rid of this, or just I don't know, like how much better will Gen 2 be versus this, and like do I upgrade? Do I skip a generation and wait for Gen 3, depending on how good the upgrade is? Like.
This is a funny feeling as a first-gen device owner. Like, where I'm at personally is I hope the next device is so much cheaper and so much better.
Yes.
Like, it's a big ask. Yeah. But I would be so happy if I look at this current gen device as a hunk of junk in a few years. I would love that. Yeah. That'd be a great outcome.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. That means the ecosystem has matured rapidly, and that would be a great thing, because there's a long way to go, you know.
Yeah. And any other just general opening statements about visionOS and the Apple Vision Pro before we move on to more specifics?
I think we can go for it. I think a lot of the earlier guests you had on, you know, most people agree they really knocked it out of the park with the basics. Like the core, like the golden path UX with the software is just, it's in a league of its own. Like I think this is really what the ecosystem needed to level up its game. Yeah, in terms of just like the basics of user interfaces, man. They did the Apple thing. They did a great job there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very intuitive, and you don't have to explain to someone how to use the user interface really outside of the initial just pinch and look at stuff. Yeah, versus controllers, which it's great for video games, but you'll notice a lot of people just struggle with using joysticks. Like that's a
Yeah. No, I bet multiple people have had this experience. I was so hyped about the VR stuff that I brought, a Quest to my parents' house, and I tried to get them to play, table tennis, whatever it was, and they absolutely loved it. They had no trouble with like the full immersion aspect of it, and they 100% struggled and fumbled with the controllers. Yeah. And they're like, what do I do with these things? Like, it's so many buttons. Like, what do I do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I wish, speaking of gaming, before you dive into some other stuff, I really wish I could plug in a racing rig to the Apple Vision Pro.
Oh my gosh.
But all of them are wired. There's no, I don't think, wireless way to do that.
Oh, there aren't Bluetooth ones off the shelf?
I don't think so. Most of them use just USB, like the PlayStation and PC ones. Because that could be cool. Is there
such a thing as like... anybody make like some USB Bluetooth bridge sort of device?
I don't know for data. I don't think for data. For audio, but because that's one that's racing in PSVR 2 is one of the coolest things in the world, and I can imagine that being cool in Apple Vision Pro if they could figure that out.
Oh yeah. So we do have that project.
Could you do foot tracking in Apple Vision Pro as a developer? Is that a thing?
Okay, so maybe barefoot.
Yeah.
So, a lot of these systems, feet look sufficiently similar to hands.
Okay.
That I actually haven't tried this with the Vision Pro.
Because I'm curious if you could do hand tracking for like, you put a Wii, you get one of those Wii remote steering wheels and just like hold it or something. And then you have your feet for the pedals maybe.
Yeah.
You might be even able to, Joy-Con does pair to the Apple Vision Pro as a controller.
Yeah.
And you get the gyro stuff. You get one of those wheels for a Joy-Con, Mario Kart wheels. You could probably do a racing game using the Joy-Con, and, feet tracking would be cool for pedals, but you could probably just use a button for acceleration and braking on the Joy-Con. But that'd be kind of cool.
I mean, one thing you can do today, I don't know if you played with this yet, but is it called ALVR?
Yes, I've heard of that for gaming PCs, and it seems pretty neat that, you can basically use it in Steam VR. So
there's the test flight. There's an open public test flight for Vision Pro. So if you wanted to, supposedly, you could do PC VR through the Vision Pro with the full-on driving rig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, that would be
it's a lot of indirection.
Yeah, that would be pretty decent, actually, because you don't have to worry about the hand tracking component. It's purely just using the racing rig. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That could be
neat. But I'm very hyped about this. I got a friend who's a little bit on the fence about this whole VR endeavor. Like he was into it for a bit. But we got this game called Euro Truck Simulator.
I've heard incredible things about that.
It has a VR mode. Like it takes some configuration to get it going. It was really, really fun. Like I don't know why it was fun. You were literally driving a truck.
Yeah.
on the highways in Europe, but it was a blast in VR. Like
in VR, one thing I was just thinking of, how cool would be a mailman simulator where you're with hand tracking, grabbing letters, and you're like throwing out letters that, like, if you have a missorted letter, you throw it in like a bin of missorts as you're delivering. I think that could work with the hand tracking, and then you make sure and you drive your little truck, make sure you don't hit anybody, any dogs. Or
might have to. I'll get back to you with a test flight.
Yeah. And you could even you could. I don't know if you could do this. If you can do video games that use both like a Joy-Con with the wheel and then also hand tracking. Can you do both controller plus hands?
Yeah. I think you can.
Because then you could have a wheel with the Joy-Con. Then you can also have hand tracking to grab things and truck.
Yeah, so there are some, depending on how much you're occluding your hands with the
Yeah.
controller, but actually, I think with a wheel, you could be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That could be
yeah,
interesting.
these combinations.
Yeah, and you'd set down
Yeah.
the wheel when you're pausing your delivery, and then do all the hand tracking, then you're ready to start driving again after that. Yeah. I don't know.
This could be the killer app,
Right?
I
I
don't
know. Yeah.
You gotta run the experiment. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Anyways, enough of a side tangent there. That
All right.
Yeah. So Vision Dev Camp. That's where you're recording from. Can you share a bit about the Dev Camp? What's going on here?
Yeah. So it's put on by this amazing volunteer team. They've been doing so. This harkens back to the 2008 with the original like iOS Dev Camp. These folks have been running this event in some form or another continuously, really over the past 15 years. I think there was a pause during COVID for the in-person event. But my understanding is there were some offshoot online events, and it's just been going strong ever since. And this is the first like Vision Pro centric one of the series. It's very, very exciting time here. I think it's a bit smaller just because the Vision Pro, it's very early days, and the admission price of like getting one of these devices, although they do have loaners available.
They do at the camp. Okay, so
some folks in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. But it's been really nice. I mean, it's been less than a day, but people are doing all sorts of interesting projects. It's a very collaborative environment. And it's also, they really try to appeal to not just like engineering types, but like welcoming people, all sorts of backgrounds, even if you've, never written a line of code in your life. And very organic, just like teams forming, coming up with fun ideas and sharing everything that they've learned. So it's only been really a few hours, but it's been such a nice environment to just spend the weekend out here.
That's very cool. What town's that hosted in?
So this is in Santa Clara. So it's interesting. I actually didn't know that. So UC Santa Cruz has another campus here in Santa Clara, which they have become kind of this beacon for the broader VR ecosystem. So a few faculty members here have really helped to foster this community and have been very generous with their time. And like, there's this long-standing meetup group called Silicon Valley VR, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, is like the longest running, kind of continuous running VR meetup, maybe in the States. And yeah, just a really great community. And I think a funny thing, I've been out here in SF. I move out here in February. But they're, it's still a small, tight-knit group. So just so many familiar faces and just really great vibes out here today.
That's awesome. And then you were also part of a month-long incubator studio where for the first month of Apple Vision Pro back in February, you were residing with other visionOS developers and those that couldn't afford Apple Vision Pro. There were extra units at the studio to get their app off the ground. So can you share a bit about that experience and just generally what the scene's like out there, like how exciting it is with other developers and partnering and collaborating with people?
Yeah. So that was this wonderful thing put on by these folks at Founders Inc. So they have this great space up in the marina here in San Francisco, like along the water, beautiful view of the bridge, just a very scenic spot, honestly. And they were really like very goodwill driven sort of endeavor. Like people signed up that were just like super stoked to be developing for this platform. They did like catered lunches for us. They gave us space. They gave loaner devices. And we all were just jamming on our Vision Pro apps, and trying to ship stuff and sharing knowledge as we went. We had this very active like Slack channel as a group. There was a nice little kickoff. The team there also was like helping mentoring people around like content marketing and the things besides just the development work.
And with visionOS, you really need to figure out a way, I think, to market the app because the App Store, you can't even browse by categories right now. If you're not in that home screen featured by Apple, your app isn't discoverable unless someone's searching for like say poker and your app comes up for that search, that
100%.
someone's searching out something in particular, which sucks because I would love to just browse categories, like what's the, writing app or whatever the categories are. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have a long way to go for content discovery on this platform. Hopefully Apple, they're working on it. I know they're working on it. People in the community are doing cool stuff. So one of the people at the residency, he made a list, like a Vision Pro apps list, and there are several of these out there now. People are free to submit. The community is kind of stepping up to fill some of these gaps.
Yeah.
Every problem is an opportunity is one way of looking at it, right? So there are many opportunities.
Yeah, I'm part of an Apple Vision Pro Discord, and one of the ongoing things is the 3D movie list, because Apple does a terrible job of showing all the 3D movies. So there's this PDF that keeps getting updated with, here's the latest one that drops.
It's literally a PDF.
The thread, people add to it, then they'll update the master document with the latest additions, because the 3D movie listing has been, when you look at all of them, it doesn't contain the entire list anymore. Sometimes you can't even find the list. It's just hidden from view because they updated the iTunes store or whatever, and it broke it. And so you need other resources to do that, because
it is funny.
It's a scene right now. It's just
it's it reminds me of all the backlash over when Twitter and Facebook and these other companies switched to their algorithmic timelines. It's like I kind of want the old school,
just show me everything.
The V1 App Store experience, because that's where we're at right now anyway, honestly.
With
the content library.
Right. We're at a state where you could browse entire categories and look at every visionOS app. That's something you were able to do with the iPad back when that launched,
So there is this funny dynamic, right? It's like the level of sophistication of the broader technology landscape, kind of the goalpost has moved. And it's like, in some way, we want it to move back. Like, it would serve this ecosystem right now if we moved it back a little bit to the good old days. Yeah.
So that month-long residency ended with a weekend DreamsXR Hackathon for visionOS apps. So what were some of the highlights in your mind from that hackathon? What kind of cool ideas were created, even if they're maybe not ready for prime time quite yet?
Yeah. So I can at the very least cover kind of like the winners.
Yeah.
But there were so many cool projects, similar vibes to this weekend. It was a bit broader. So, DreamsXR, it was co-sponsored by Unity and I believe Meta and some other folks. So it was taking a broader lens on this landscape. So there were a lot of Quest projects, and there were some like phone-based AR projects too, I believe. Some WebXR stuff, like a big. Have you ever played with? I believe it's called the Tilt 5. Wait, am I spelling this correctly? It's this interesting. Yeah. So this AR system, like really designed for tabletop experiences, where you. Have you heard of this?
No, I've not.
Okay. I think they did a Kickstarter a few years back. Very interesting concept, but it's like you have this play mat, and the mat has this reflective finish, and so like the AR like system, it's like you project light onto the mat, and it projects back into your eyes. It's like this clever hack.
It reminds me of like the live scribe pens, where you use special paper and the pen knows where you're writing on the paper based on the grid or whatever.
Those are very interesting. Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about those recently, actually, but that's a total sidebar.
Yes.
But like they took a really wide lens in terms of like this broader XR ecosystem.
Interesting. Yeah. And Quest development's so interesting to me, because it's, to my knowledge, even to build a word processing app, you need to do it in like Unity and build out through a game engine. It's wild.
A lot of people, I think you can avoid Unity if you try hard, but that is kind of the golden path. It's really the golden path. Whereas on visionOS, you have two kind of equally viable paths, like with the native system frameworks, and then you also have Unity, right? But yeah, in terms of kind of what I saw, the two projects that really kind of took the show, they were amazing projects. So this first one, Accidental Picasso, it was a Vision Pro app, really cool concept. So you would It's kind of a play off of some of these drawing games that you might play at a friend's house, or like, a charade style game. But you would get this like a 3D model. I believe they were doing a setup with like a generative 3D model. So it could be a pretty goofy figure. And then you would try to recreate that, like the best that you can. And then your friends would have to guess, like, what is this thing? Like
recreate it by drawing?
I believe so. You were kind of using geometry primitives to recreate it. And and they would have to guess, like, what did you make? And it was really intriguing concept. I think like it was amazing, just like the scale of what they built over just a couple days, and it had multiplayer and all this stuff going. So hopefully, we'll see that on the App Store. They get it to the finish line. Very cool concept, and I'm a big believer in having more multiplayer experiences, even though it is a bit early. Like, it's hard to have a big group of friends that all have Vision Pros, but very exciting stuff. And then there was another project more in the productivity space, which was really interesting, called Smoothie. And that was a spatial video editor. So also very ambitious. They were trying to do, Final Cut or iMovie or what have you for spatial video.
For 3D video itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So also, very ambitious to try and do in a weekend, but they made some good progress and had something to demo. And kind of, immediately you run up against these interesting challenges of like, what is even like a motion between, or, like crossfades and cross dissolves in 3 dimensions, and like, how do you do title sequences? And like, it really is all 3D.
That's super cool. Cause you can do 3D titles. Yeah. And preview it in the headset and what that's like.
Yeah. Or if you have like side by side video and they're 3-dimensional, and then they start kind of blending into each other a little bit, it's a whole thing, right? It's very interesting to think about.
I love that. And did you see, I purchased the $3 Spatial Iffy, I think it's called. It's for iPhone, and it lets you capture spatial photos and videos on your iPhone, but the videos are 4K 30 frames per second HDR. And they look
blowing up.
They look phenomenal. Yeah, I downloaded like a week ago.
Okay.
They look so good, and I'm so it's amazing. And you can set it to the action button on your iPhone. So when you hit the action button, opens the app right to the camera, and then just like the camera app, it can use the action button to start a video or photo, which I had not seen before with other camera apps. I thought you had to use the volume button for that.
Very cool.
And it's really nice to be able to do spatial just photo capture on your phone, because that was just baffling to me that Apple didn't let you do that. And in Apple's way of doing spatial video, you always have to let me tap into the little tiny goggle icon to make sure it's that. So it's very nice to be able to just instantly be in there and be ready to capture.
No nested menus or anything to deal with.
Yeah. So that'd be cool to have a video editor designed for all the stuff I'm capturing here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you remember what the interface? It was like a flat 2D app, but has 3D assets within there that you're manipulating.
Yeah, I think with this, they did imagine still more of a desktop editing workflow. Mm-hmm. And this is always an interesting question mark when you get into the space of more professional tools of how much of that do you want to do in headset? Yes. And how much of it, when you get down to the nitty gritty of manipulating the timeline and stuff. Yeah, because
the developer, I would assume you have to write visionOS apps, assuming you don't have a keyboard or trackpad, but this person probably would,
Yeah, I mean, you can start to make some assumptions probably with the pro workflows.
Yeah.
But it's tough, and I think we're gonna this will be an interesting question mark really over the next 5 years of how much to lean in.
Yeah, because I edit this podcast now in visionOS, and I'm actually blown away with the hand and eye tracking. I can look at the end of an audio clip. So I use the strip silence thing, and I could look at the end of an audio clip and I can bring it in. I can tap on something in coming up without interrupting playback, and delete it really easily. And it feels so nice in a way that I didn't expect this, the more meticulous stuff would.
Yeah.
And I do use the trackpad and keyboard quite a bit still, but the eye tracking alone is impressive to me, just what I can do there.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty darn good. Like, hopefully it'll continue to improve and we get from like 95% to 99.99% sort of accuracy. Yeah, but it's already very impressive. Yeah.
So what else was at the hackathon?
So I can share a bit about the team that I was on, our project. So we had this funky idea. We end up calling it ... But the premise is it's pretty fun. Just given that kind of everyone who sets up the Vision Pro has to do this eye calibration process. We kind of took that experience and turned it on its head. And so when you enter this game, like, it literally looks like the eye calibration setup, and you think like, oh wait, am I doing the eye calibration again? And then it quickly morphs into like a full-on game. The dots start moving around, starts layering on different mechanics. And kind of the thrust here, the motivation was like, what could be a game that is uniquely more fun because of eye-based input? And I think this is like an underexplored design space. I mean, it's hard for it to be well-trodden ground given that eye input has not been a thing for most people for very long. Yeah.
And Apple restricts it in many ways to make it also harder to work with.
Yeah. So, you can at least do targeting, and you can start to think about, okay. So like with the mouse, a conventional mouse pointer, right? There's, is it Fitts law? There's some like kind of UX guideline about how it's easy to target things that are at corners.
Yeah, I think Accidental Tech Podcast was talking about this, how you'll throw your mouse to the very top of the screen and just generally be hitting an area, and that works.
Right. Yeah. But so the Vision Pro has no corners. Like, you're just in space. And your eyes are very good at quickly targeting things, like kind of regardless of where they are, or like your eyes plus your face, like kind of moving, darting around. And like, there is an element of, yes, eye fatigue will set in if you go too extreme in this direction. But it's fun to start to imagine, like, what is a gameplay experience that leans into that? Like the eyes as the input modality, where it would be very difficult to play something with a mouse, but it's actually easier and more fun to play with your eyes as the mouse,
Yeah.
So this was kind of the beginning of an exploration in that direction.
Yeah, and you showed me a demo of this, and it looked wildly fun. Like, it just like, oh, I'm just in the eye tracking thing to get set up, and then, as you said, each stage kind of just gets weirder and weirder with where
it escalates. Yeah, exactly. So we made like 5 levels for the hackathon, and kind of the aspiration is to do 100 or so. There is a public test flight up, like if folks are intrigued to check it out. But hopefully we'll get, a more buttoned up version in the App Store over the coming months. Yeah. And welcome kind of suggestions from the audience about fun mechanics we could start layering on, get really wild with the concept.
No, yeah, that sounds awesome. And yeah, I'll include the test flight in the show notes if you send that to me. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So how has it been for balancing ideas across with other developers in this kind of scene? Like, what kind of ideas have you gotten from just that collaborative nature that you wouldn't have gotten in isolation?
Yeah, I think it has been really, really helpful to just bounce concepts off of each other. And people have been sharing like little code snippets and fun kind of like little hacks around like input. Or, you'll read the code samples from Apple and you'll be like, okay, this looks really complex. And then someone's like, oh, no. Like, here's my little helper extension, like that takes care of that. That's all been very nice. I think a lot of folks have remarked, like, we're still at that era of like pull to refresh has not been invented, or like the equivalent of that for this platform. So I think everyone is still kind of like poking at different styles of interaction and interesting things that you can do building on top of the baseline gesture stack. So
because you as a developer can add your own custom gestures, and if one of those really takes off, then Apple might adopt that system wide. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So that's the exciting moment for us. You can really kind of go pie in the sky and imagine these fun little micro interactions. And even just kind of like getting the basics right of like input, targeting things, like right sizing objects, figuring out, the constraints. Because I think visionOS is uniquely challenging in terms of you have a wide array of options, each with their own weird, quirky constraints. So really just like talking to other developers and learning from their experience, like, oh, what can you not do? Like oftentimes what is impossible is very helpful information. It saves you days or weeks of your life.
One thing I'm curious about, so on visionOS, to tap, it's your thumb and index finger. If you tap your thumb and middle finger, it doesn't do anything. Can you as a developer, you can as a developer have like 5 different or 4 different taps, one for middle finger, fourth finger, and pinky together, and I could see that being a thing. Like as a right click, you do the middle finger tap, and right? I mean,
someone at the dev camp today is working on something along these lines. Yeah, I mean, there was prior art as well, I think, on the Quest ecosystem, or PCVR, I guess more so the Quest. They have a great hand tracking system. There's a lot,
Yeah, Moonplayer, I think, has this option of doing the middle finger tap to show or hide the playback controls to show that. So that is implemented there because they thought, hey, let's do the middle finger tap to have less accidental input. We're watching a movie type thing. So there is at least one developer doing it already, which is neat.
Yeah, I mean, these are our paintbrushes,
Yeah.
There's so much you can do with hand input, and we are just like, I wouldn't even say we're scratching the surface. We're like crawling,
Well, one of the cool things I discovered the other day was you can start dragging a file, say from the Files app or Messages, and with your other hand, you can navigate the entire system and hold it with your other hand and drag stuff into it. So you can do 2 hands simultaneously doing different things, which is fun.
Yeah, and it's a great tribute to kind of like the multi-touch stuff. I feel like the
10 fingers of iPad. Like, you can have 10 different, like the app Uzu on iPad. I'm not sure if you remember that one. It was like basically it's a black screen, and when you put one finger on it, it'll have like a firework thing reacting to that. You 2 fingers on, it reacts differently, all the way up to 10 fingers, and it came on iPad on day 1, still out. It's a phenomenal, just fun app to just play around with light kind of thing. And all 10 fingers do something different to the screen.
Yeah, this kind of stuff has me, on the edge of my seat. I'm just like so excited for everything that people will build when we really start to dig a bit deeper. Like there's this question of like how far can we go in terms of like actions per minute with high precision, and it's just like actually it could be so many, but we're not there.
Yeah, like imagine like it's a video editor. Imagine thumb and middle finger is like you cut versus like a tap versus there could be all sorts of interactions where you have your 10 fingers doing different things, and even your left and right hand might have different controls. And what does it look like creating a custom keyboard shortcut thing for your hands? Like in the system, in the preferences for your app, you can say, here's the different hand gestures you can customize, and thumb and middle finger tap for your right hand is this, and it's that for your left hand. And for pro apps, I could see that being a real thing where you could get pretty far along with just hand tracking in that way. Yeah,
absolutely. There's this guy, Doug Engelbart, who unfortunately passed a few years back, but he's renowned as the guy who did the mother of all demos, is what it's referred to as. And I don't know if you've come across this, but it's kind of the origin of it all, in terms of like graphical user interfaces, network computing, a lot of the input mechanisms we take for granted today. A lot of people know this guy really as just like, for some reason he became the inventor of the mouse. Like that's the thing that stuck. But the work that he's done is much, much deeper than that. And one of these things that he did that kind of was set aside in history that maybe we'll get back to with this stuff, honestly, is this idea of a corded keyboard. So it kind of reminded me of, have you seen like a stenographer, the way that they type?
I have not.
They have they have a really funky keyboard setup with all this shorthand. And they'll do like multiple parallel kind of keystrokes, and it'll be like a whole word in like, a fraction of a second. using like actually getting people to use all 10 fingers for input, like besides just like typing on a conventional keyboard, I think there really is something there. And maybe some of these ideas could come back to the surface now that hand tracking gets better.
Yeah, definitely.
Hopefully, yeah.
So you were also at GDC, the Game Developer Conference. That was last month, I believe. And you mentioned to me that VR gaming was kind of a big thing this year. Can you share a bit of what you experienced at the conference?
Yeah. So GDC wrapped up, I guess, a week ago. And it was my first GDC. Great experience. I just got there's an expo pass, if you want to do it on a budget, if you don't have an employer kind of paying for the tickets.
Right. Because they're expensive, the full whatever.
Yeah. But, good on them for getting everyone together. But yeah, there was a lot of excitement about kind of this XR space. I would say that it was still predominantly weighted towards Meta's platform. And I think part of that is just there are people who have been in this industry literally for a decade. They've been building stuff the whole time. And, this new device just got launched a month prior to this conference, right? And a lot of these folks had prior commitments. They're in the middle of shipping a game, a lot of them, right? And so, yeah, still a lot more within the broader XR space, a lot more emphasis on titles for the Quest, more conventional VR. But there were these little sparks of people doing really, even within that world, people doing really interesting things with pass-through and really embracing mixed reality and room scale stuff that I was really blown away by. So I guess the two titles that are really top of mind for me are Laser Dance by this guy, I think it's Tomas. I hope it's either Thomas or Tomas, doing amazing stuff. And another one that got a lot of hype called Starship Home. So both of these, I really saw them, they were kind of reimagining what is a game? And how do you use your room and bring it into the game and actually make it this delightful, fun, new dynamic that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. So, I mean, there were so many cool projects, but I think from the lens of someone building for Vision Pro, those two really, really stood out for me. But then the kind of unfortunate thing is most people, there's some trepidation about building for the Vision Pro. And part of that is a lot of them are coming from this controllers as input sort of context. That's a core assumption that they've been working with for years.
It seems very hard to translate that into pure hand tracking because
right.
I mean, first off, you don't have haptics in your hands in that way. The precision of a joystick, there's a lot of things that I'd love to be able to use my sense controllers from my PSVR 2 with Apple Vision Pro one day. That'd be great.
Yep. Yeah. And then I think I wouldn't say it's a nefarious element, but more like a strategic thing. I think Meta has some of these folks locked into kind of a contractual obligation.
Sure.
Maybe they, part of the deal is they had to make a platform exclusive, or there's, you're just in the middle of something and you have a small team, you're under resourced. The gaming industry as a whole kind of took a hit, like a lot of the broader tech industry, right?
Yeah, a lot of layoffs.
The hangover after COVID, after the boom
and VR itself is a niche already, let alone visionOS.
Right. Yeah. So I think there is also just this prioritization challenge, right? And folks, if you're going to try and make do with the scrappy team and scratch two pennies together and see what you can do, there is this element of just okay, probably want to target the platform that has more devices shipped out there in the world. So this is something I see changing a lot. I fully expect it to change over that 5-year time horizon. But I do think that it would behoove Apple as an organization to embrace the realities of the game development world. And, when you're a direct competitor, or I don't know how these organizations view each other, but when your direct competitor is literally writing checks to game studios and seed funding new game studios, maybe you should do the same.
Meta is more of a game console in my mind, like an Xbox, versus Apple's is more like a computer, which it's a computer system versus, that doesn't pay for console exclusives like you would in the gaming space. And I think they need to kind of merge that a bit if they want to really compete in that way.
Yeah. And I'm all for, like, I love the concept of this growing into a much broader productivity platform. Like, I would love for gaming as a use case to be eclipsed ultimately by just kind of general computing stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it's just not where we're at today.
Yeah. And if you're going to support a DualSense controller, Xbox controller, why not support a hand tracking controller as well in this platform? You already support game controllers.
World.
Yeah, you already support game controllers. Support the ones designed for VR if you're gonna.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and maybe on the flip side of that, so besides all the, just the fact that the Vision Pro is pretty niche, and it probably will be for a while from the gaming lens, at least for like the AAA sort of titles, and even to some extent with the indie stuff. The flip side of this is like there's so much cool stuff happening with generative AI, and I mean it's not surprising, right? It's just like been spread across the world, every use case you can throw at it, right? But it's really exciting from the lens of like an indie developer like myself, or like these small studios that are really trying to go far with very few resources. You can generate incredible high fidelity, like fully skeleton rigged 3D models in a matter of seconds these days. Like that's just nuts. Like, having access to that sort of capability as like a solo developer is mind bending, like in terms of what you can do on a very shoestring budget.
And what was the platform that had that Matrix demo last year? Was that
that was probably Unreal.
Yeah, was that Unreal 5 or whatever? And that's in Unreal that did not run on Apple stuff. Is that right?
Well, actually, there's been a lot of progress on that front.
Okay.
I mean, so the cool thing with, Unreal Engine, the development is happening out in the open for the most part. Like, there's a place, like a GitHub repository. You can go there and track the progress on visionOS support. And I think it's gonna, at least like the first version of it is on its way to shipping.
Okay, that's cool because that technology is really cool for building out huge worlds,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this is a really unfortunate thing with corporate dynamics. It is the space age technology game engine is unfortunately the company that's at war, literally at war.
Yeah, Epic owns them, right?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Anything else from GDC before we move on to your apps?
No, I think. Yeah, I mean, it's a great event. Like, strongly recommend folks attend if they're trying to get into this world. Great way to meet folks. I had so many chance encounters with amazing people, like personal heroes, So it was just a delight.
That's awesome. So February 2nd hits, and your app, Mahjong Space, is out in the visionOS App Store as your first visionOS app. So first off, why'd you start there? Do you have like a personal affinity to this game? And what have you learned since shipping it and using it more and more on real hardware?
Yeah. So, I want to start like fully appreciate that Mahjong is a pretty niche game in the US. But it's something that I picked up really around the time the Vision Pro was announced. So I was living in Singapore, and so I went over to a friend's house, and they're like, "Hey, we're gonna teach you Mahjong."
Yeah,
and
you do have a good tutorial to teach you how to play this game if you haven't learned it yet within the app. Which is good.
Yeah. There's a tutorial mode, and definitely kind of working on the next revision of that. But just something really clicked in my head. Just having learned the game, the Vision Pro SDK was announced. I think a lot of developers, you write down your list. And for me, I knew it would be really fun as a side project to do a game. There were some usual suspects that I figured someone's going to do that. Someone's going to do solitaire. Someone's going to do the conventional card-based games. I'm still shocked, honestly, that as far as I know, like Texas Hold'em has not shipped on. Like that was one of the games that I immediately disqualified, and so now I'm getting back to that, but we can talk about that later. So I ran down this list, and then it's like, okay, what is possible? All right, so that's the next set of what can you actually do, and what can I personally actually do? And I think Mahjong, it struck this beautiful balance of like, it's a really compelling, deep multiplayer game, and it's really three-dimensional. Like, cards are
Flat
2D in a way. They're flat.
Yeah.
Right. Mahjong tiles are truly three-dimensional, and so there was something just beautiful and mesmerizing about the tiles themselves that really spoke to me. And then the more I learned about the game, like the more my mind was blown. I was just like, oh my god, this is such a deep game.
Does the game have any relationship to the dominoes of the game, like tiles that you try to pair up and stuff?
Okay,
Are they at all related?
So this is a funny thing. So in the US, there's this thing called Mahjong Solitaire, which is kind of like a modern invention. I think really of like the video game era. And I think like some version of this shipped on Windows like back in the day or something. But like Mahjong is, it's really this multiplayer game. It's a lot more like poker. I think it's one of these unfortunate things where like, like solitaire and like you would never confuse Texas Hold'em and solitaire in the US. And it's kind of like that. It's like, unfortunately there are two games that are just straight up called Mahjong in the US. But like one is Texas Hold'em and one is solitaire, or like one is like match the dots and one is Texas Hold'em. It's kind of that sort of thing. But yeah, this started as a weekend project. I was like, okay, let's get some cubes rendering. Let's get some boxes going on the screen. And the more I got into it, the more I was just like, oh my god! Like, first of all, this is a very complex game. Like, it's going to take forever to implement the rules, but that's fine. That's whatever. But I was just like, it's such a fascinating, beautiful game. And I start reading, like, there are research papers out there. People they try to measure the complexity of different games. Everyone's trying to make like bots and stuff for their favorite game, and like there's an area of deep research in like the machine learning community. Like there was a team at Microsoft that wrote a paper a few years back. They're like, Mahjong is like really hard. Like to get a bot to learn how to play Mahjong is really hard because it has this massive state space and there's a lot of hidden information. And so it's like randomness plus massive state space plus hidden like there's a reason like a lot of folks get addicted to this game. It's like it absorbs you. Like it really absorbs your attention. And it feels infinitely deep. There's so much nuance to it. So there's just kind of this. I love doing projects where you're learning two things at once. Trying to maximize learning. That's kind of how I optimize, at least for my side projects. So I was like, wow, like I'm learning this incredibly deep game. Like hopefully I'll be good enough to play against my friends after I do this project.
Yeah. And there's a lot of modes within the app that you did launch. There is like the tutorial mode. There's like a mode where you're actually playing by the rules, and then there's like a free for all mode where you're just kind of like doing whatever you want to do with the tiles.
Yeah. So kind of have been layering on some capabilities. So the sandbox is kind of this. There is this realization, at least in the US, right? Like. Some people just want to play with. I feel like a lot of people just want an experience where they can play with some physical objects in the Vision Pro, like literally a sandbox. So I was like, hey, like why not? Like it started as it was just helpful for me to debug the gesture system at first, and I was like, hey, this is just fun. Like I'll just ship it. This is strictly for fun. Like why not ship it? But there's a lot to do. Like, I feel like this is one of those projects that I'll keep working on for years and years and it'll never be done. And that's okay. Like, as long as I shipped it, like, I'm happy that it's out there. And I'm really excited for the APAC country launches, hopefully coming over the next couple of months.
So this app can exist both as a volume and, like, pinning itself on top of tables as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the default experience that I offer people is to play inside of a volume. This is something that Apple really pushed for with their design guidance. And I think it is a delightful opportunity for folks that's kind of unique to visionOS at the moment. Because you can really have these whole little worlds living inside of volumes. And the great thing is you can do full multitasking while they're live. So, you can be doing some work, get your Pomodoro timer going, and then kind of treat yourself with a little Mahjong break off to the side, which is very, very fun. So I'm very excited for people to keep playing with this as a new sort of thing that you can do besides just conventional windows and these more full-on immersive 3D spaces.
Yeah, I love the idea of just surrounding yourself in windows, and swivel chairs are, I think, a great accessory to Apple Vision Pro. Being able to just swivel around and see your workspace surrounded by different things.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for like the Grandmaster mode of like a chess app where you can have like 4 matches going in parallel and you just swivel your chair
that'd be great.
For the next opponent.
Yeah. And as far as like spatial personas and the original concept for this game, dealing with personas and multiplayer, how big of a bummer was it for Spatial Personas not to be here quite yet?
Yeah. So this is something, when I saw the video at WWDC, I was like, oh my gosh, like I definitely want to do that. And then it turned out, it's not quite shipped. So we're still stuck with FaceTime in Windows for now, but I cannot wait for that to be out the door. I'm very hopeful that, WWDC is just around the corner, that this will become a thing that we can do. But yeah, the more I reflected on this problem, kind of realized that you actually, like, for a lot of game experiences, you probably want to have your own avatar system that does not involve FaceTime. Because if you're going to be playing matches against people that you don't really know, and doing like online matchmaking, there is still kind of a gap there.
Yeah, because FaceTime, even if you're comfortable using Persona, it leaves a record of who you just called, and then they have your contact information in a way you may not.
Right.
Want.
Yeah. So probably not going to be swapping phone numbers with random people on the internet. Yeah. So now thinking about, for version 2 of this Mahjong experience, having more of a custom avatar system, maybe you can be some like mythological character, have some fun with it. But a lot to do there.
It'd be interesting if Apple added, like they have the email addresses that you can turn off.
Oh yeah.
Having a generic FaceTime thing for Game Center that's like
cool.
A unique code that doesn't link you to your real stuff as much.
Yeah, I would be super into that. Like honestly, what Apple was exploring with the Animoji a few years back. I mean, part of me wonders, if like there was some version of that ready to go, and then they're like, hey, like this can be a counterpoint to Meta's thing. Like we're gonna go full photorealistic. But I would still love to see that, having the more goofy characters a little bit less lifelike and a little bit more anonymous. I think for certain styles of interaction and gameplay, that could be a really wonderful thing for the community.
So we are teleporting a bit in the future from the original recording, and we're here with Spatial Personas now having launched, and we're joined not only by Ethan, but Rylan as well. Welcome, Rylan.
Hi. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Can you introduce kind of your background and a bit about yourself real quick?
Sure. So I'm Rylan Pozniak-Daniels. I'm a Vision Pro developer and the creator of AR Lingo, which is the first XR language learning app on Vision Pro. And it has like virtual worlds and ways to learn the languages through a spatial medium with the virtual characters. And I come from a lot of years of experience specifically focused on XR. So I've just done a lot of hackathons, a lot of XR apps like in education space, medical space, gaming, different ways. Did some XR for the astronauts for NASA. Did some XR for just like a whole range of applications. And I think my current mission is to figure out how to build apps that can help to democratize XR to the masses, because I think that it's such a powerfully transformative technology, but we have to figure out how to make apps that are really, going to provide great value to people, and then that will also democratize the headset piece of it as well. So I'm really excited to be developing apps for Vision Pro and stuff like that.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I really need to check out your app, because I did look before our recording started, and it looks pretty neat. So yeah, we're recording this now as Spatial Personas. So we're around the Mahjong board, as we talked about. I'm trying to think if we talked about this yet in the episode, but we will at some point in this episode talk about Mahjong Space. And it's been fully realized now as Spatial Personas. Is this what you imagined it to be when you were designing the game? And
We're very close. We're very close to what we imagined. So, we'll be getting some patch releases out over the next couple of weeks to really take advantage of the spatial personas. But yes, this is much more of the dream. Really having that experience of getting around the tabletop with your friends and feeling like you're there together in person. So we have, the Mahjong table in front of us, and I see Tim and I see Rylan, across the table. It's a pretty magical experience, honestly. Like, for the first time, I really feel that sense of co-presence, as if we were there in person. And yeah, I mean, I'm blown away that Apple shipped it, sooner than expected. We had that little bit of a, surprise, I guess, on launch day when it wasn't available. And then I think there was a moment where we thought, oh, it might take until WWDC for this to see the light of day. And then, you know, exactly 2 months after the device launched, here it is.
And it was a server-side toggle in 1.1. Very curious.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and one of the first things I did try to do in your game was look at your tiles, and you do have a setting that disables cheating.
Yep, the anti-cheating mode. Yeah. Yeah, so that's it's anti-cheating by default at the request of some folks at Apple, who gave nice feedback about the app as I was getting ready to launch.
It is funny though, because it's very obvious if someone was trying to cheat. So it's not like you can get away with cheating without,
that's true. It's like,
being called out on it.
That's the delight of the spatial personas. Yeah. Exactly that. Yeah. And I think it'll be amazing for things like poker and other styles of games where you really want to see the person's facial expression and tell if they're bluffing maybe, or, you know, just having that sense of, hey, like, where are you at in the game?
I mean, it is interesting because, like, it is a shared experience, but there are still aspects that are, like, still personal to each of us, right? So I can't see your tiles, but also we have unique physical spaces that we're in. So, like, I can't actually see the physical space. I only see the, like, digital, like, AR models of your heads and your hands. But they're kind of, like, in my space. So it's interesting how, even though it's a shared experience, there's interesting combination of both the, like, personal and the shared things that are happening simultaneously. I don't think any consumer AR VR glasses have ever really played with this kind of idea before, that it's like, it's augmented reality, spatial computing, but you're kind of melding a shared virtual world and a shared real, and like a non-shared real world. It's kind of really interesting.
Yeah, and earlier you could see me typing on the keyboard in front of me, and
it's like you did these.
You can't see the keyboard, but you can see that I'm typing. And maybe if you can analyze where my fingers are going, you can see what I'm typing, maybe, but that'd be a little difficult.
And I do think they prioritize, like, the right things for this as an MVP experience, because hands give you so much expression. Especially in maybe other parts of the world.
Talk with their hands, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is strictly necessary for this to launch.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, but there are still the quirks. So, like, if somebody turns around, you know, the back of their head.
No, you turn totally invisible.
In the capture, so it kind of fades out, and yeah, there's some funkiness with people being obscured by
you
geometry.
need to go to, like, an Apple store and have a whole body scanned on, you know.
That would be cool.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
I mean, I think the Vision Pro could do more, or definitely your phone could actually do a full body scan. Like, there are apps shipping on the App Store today.
But it's so different from what. So when I was hearing the podcast, so you're no longer in a frame anymore, no background behind you. It's totally experiencing it is totally different from just hearing about it, which it makes this podcast difficult. But basically, I'm trying to say it really does feel like I'm sitting around a table with two different people playing this game, and it's not at all like just having windows of you guys right in front of where you're really here. It's a different kind of sensation. It's kind of hard to describe in that way.
It's like we're actually there.
Totally, yeah.
And it is nuts. You know, we are on the street of LA outside of a coffee shop, and this combination of, like, I've been tweaking the pass-through and tweaking the environments, and you can really seamlessly go in and out of immersion and just feel like you're hanging in a room with your friends, and then you pop back out into the real world and you're like, whoa, what is
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's pretty cool how like Vision Pro has this, like a digital crown. So the digital crown can like progressively make you go into a virtual world, and it's still kind of your own world, but it's like you kind of transition between different worlds. So I think that's really good in a spatial thing, because, you know, we're like sharing this spatial 3D model of the board in front of us, but it works so much better when we as avatars are 3D as well, instead of just 2D panels. And I think that is just so important for like a shared game or a shared app kind of thing.
Yeah, and when we entered Mahjong Space as a share play session, it put us around the board at the appropriate spot. When I opened up a freeform board earlier, it put us kind of next to each other, and we were all able to add to the board simultaneously, which is really neat. So I can imagine we were just drawing and having fun to being artistic, we could say. But if you're...
as best as we could with our finger painting.
But you could imagine a session where you're brainstorming with a collaborator and, you know, writing down notes and adding some sketch, you know, some wireframes or whatnot to a board. And yeah, it's pretty interesting.
This is a level of like humane co-presence that I haven't experienced on any other platform. Like Meta has done really interesting things with their avatar system. But playing with Horizon Workrooms for the first time, you know, it just did not compare. This is an entirely different.
Yeah, Horizon Workroom. Is that the closest compare to this, as far as like you're sitting around a document and working on something, or?
Yeah, in a way, I guess. But that is kind of a constrained environment. Like I think this is the amazing kind of judo trick that Apple pulled off is, this comes for free in every single app experience. So we don't have to be transported to a special room or a special app to do this co-presence thing. The co-presence is baked into the operating system, and then you can enable it with any app actually at this point, right?
In Horizon Workroom, that's pure VR, right?
Yes. I could see them layering on pass-through features, but I think it really is about like, what is the destination? You know, is the destination you have to go into an app to do co-presence, and then you're only constrained to activities that are offered within that app? Or is the destination your app, and the operating system provides these primitives for? That is a much more powerful approach.
Yeah, because the visionOS approach is you just start a FaceTime call. We shared a link around and we all joined, and then we're in each other's spaces, and then we could jump in the different apps. Like we start with Freeform, then we open Mahjong. You could open up, say, the Apple TV app and watch WWDC together in this way.
Right. And so you stay together across all those. There is still a little bit of awkwardness, I think, for people, or like the learning curve here is, what do I start first? I think for a lot of people, that's the question mark. It's like, do I need to start FaceTime first, or can I start an app first and collaborate from the app? So that's, I guess as a developer ecosystem, that's something that we have to figure out kind of best practices around conveying.
I just switched us into a shared Safari window. Am I the only one to control this, or are you able to change what's going on?
Yeah. I think this is effectively screen sharing, so you're the one driving.
That's going on, so it's just screen sharing. So, okay. So it's just you're just viewing what I'm showing.
I'm just viewing it, yeah. But what is cool is that it did automatically alter our positions to fit this 2D content, right? So for the board, we were kind of around the board.
Yeah.
And then like automatically as you open a new piece of content that's shared, it sort of realigned our positions to be like almost not around an object, but sort of all in front of an object. It's kind of pretty interesting.
And do you have the ability to change the window size, or is it stuck at whatever size I have it at?
Let's see. Oh, yeah. Actually, it looks like it's locked.
Okay.
As far as I can tell.
And
yeah.
Oh, that's interesting because I can't even change the size of it right now. That's super curious. I can change how far away it is from me, but not the size.
Yeah.
That's super curious. Okay.
So there are some funky constraints, but for having that available in every single app might be
Yeah, because if you're working on something, you can say, hey, look at this window. Hey, let's go over, do this. And just the hangout nature of it is really amazing. Because we talked about earlier in the episode that, I'd open up walk about mini golf, just have a hangout with friends. But there, you hear their voice and all that, but it's not the same. So I'll be curious to see what other game developers do with this and other.
But I think it's very useful for like virtual worlds because even in the social system of the Meta platform, it works more like traditional games, right? Where you first enter the game and then you join a server. And I guess the one thing you could do there that maybe you can't yet do in Vision Pro is you could also hang out with people socially that maybe you don't know, just people who are on the internet, right? So I think it's a much more personal experience of Vision Pro where you're kind of syncing that with the FaceTime. But I think that adds a level where you're actually hanging out with real people in these either, a mixed reality or virtual reality world. So, I think it's just a brand new take on what that would look like.
Yeah, because we talked about earlier in the episode that you basically are sharing your phone number or email address if you're entering one of these. So, it's
that's true.
You could share this link out to the wide, world, but you probably wouldn't want to.
Yeah, so this is kind of the next frontier, I think, for Apple to decide how much they want to lean into, like, completely online experiences where you may be playing this.
Yeah, like it'd be cool to be able to share a link that's more private as far as when people are joining, they don't get your contact information kind of deal.
Yeah, so I'm hopeful we might see something like that, but I'm not holding my breath, I guess, just because it is very tied into.
It really is. Yeah, you almost need to tie it in like more Game Center first.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
But in the spatial audio is really remarkable too. It was there with the windows and placing windows different places, but it's kind of remarkable when it's just people that are sitting around a table.
Yeah, it sounds like it's coming from you. It's coming right from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, when it oriented the window in front of us and moved you to, the audio changed to where you were then placed. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, Rylan and I, we have been brainstorming, I think since we did our first Spatial Persona call, thinking about fun experiences that this unlocks. And something that immediately came to mind for both of us is this idea of a campfire. This is very classic, like, cradle of humanity kind of stuff. But it's like, wouldn't it be awesome to just like gather around a campfire together and do fun little activities?
Even a campfire. You're talking like just a campfire app. Like you have different campfires in front of you.
Like a mixed reality or virtual reality, like you'd like put a campfire there, and you could even like maybe have some kind of interaction of like you like hold up a stick with a s'mores or marshmallow on it, and like actually have that interaction. That would be like really really rad. Just having that.
Maybe some drums in front of you. Yeah, that could be super cool. What other experiences have you tried spatially so far?
Actually, AR Quick Look has been really, really fun to just like pull up a model. Maybe we could try that real quick and just kind of see something cool in 3D together as a shared experience. So Apple has this gallery of different, let's bring up an astronaut maybe, or a cosmonaut.
So is this just from the Files app in Quick Look?
So you can open any USDZ from the Files app. This one is pulled from Apple's, they have a developer website with a bunch, basically a showcase gallery of really cool USDZ files.
Oh, I see it now.
Okay, it's 100% scale, but yeah.
That is wild. Okay. So yeah, this is from a website that you're sharing.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think there is something very powerful about this combo. This is essentially just a static 3D model. But because this real-time interaction is baked like deeply into the operating system, it's like every file becomes this nexus of collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, being able to fight over and like both control the same thing is an interesting just concept of what you could do with that potentially.
Yeah.
Although a scale is not being adjusted, right? So if I scale it, do you see it being scaled?
Yeah, I'm actually not able to. It says scaling is unavailable. And
it's locked into a certain size. I can change where it's positioned by me. And when I move the astronaut, it also moves you guys along with it. So, one question I had, have you gone to the maximum, like 5 people, or what's the maximum?
We did 4 people. But I think you might be right.
And the 4 people thing, that was a good experience with like...
Yeah, it was perfect. I mean, that was seamless. Like, very few there's not really a dropped frame experience that we had, but we did have moments where someone kind of turned into the avatar coin for a second or something. But otherwise it was seamless.
That's awesome, because at WWDC, I thought they mentioned only one-on-one for Spatial Personas back in the original announcement, or am I misremembering?
Yeah, I don't know if that was like the rumor mill around it or if they did an official announcement, but yeah, I was blown away, honestly, that they support. Oh, where'd it go? He's moving around. Yeah, I was pretty blown away that it supports this level of collaboration out of the gate. That's plenty for my board game purposes. Like,
yeah, I want the board game scene to explode, quite honestly.
I mean, I'm actually quite curious because like we've tried this in like mixed reality with how would this work in virtual reality context? Like you're entirely immersed, because it would be then like a shared virtual world, right? Instead of just like, us like sharing, AR assets in like our own real environments. How could this work in like a shared, whole virtual world?
You'd have more stuff you could interact with versus just the one board or the one object. You'd have an entire room full of stuff to work with.
Yeah. So this is something I'm really stoked about exploring, like in the Mahjong context, but also more broadly. So like we all enter the same kind of Mahjong parlor. Actually, why don't we just try this with Game Room like right now? Because I'm pretty sure Game Room should support some level of this. Yeah, because the power of being in a fully immersive experience with something like this is then we can all be pointing to different reference points in the actual room, and we're all in that shared room. It can be really compelling for like multiplayer experience, like say an escape room style experience, right? Where we're all gathered together and we have to solve a puzzle and the room is the puzzle. And you're pointing here, I'm pointing there. Like we're all trying to kind of unravel the mystery. Things like that I think will be really, really compelling down the road as people get more acclimated to what's possible with this stuff.
This is wild. So I just discovered, as we're recording this is totally unrelated to Spatial Personas, but if you try to type something on your Apple Watch while wearing the Apple Vision Pro, you'll get a notification little bubble you can tap on and then type with your Vision Pro on your Apple Watch.
Oh, what?
I don't know if this is new in version 1.1.2 that just released today as we record.
It's already integrating like the Apple ecosystem, like already.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, if you have a MacBook, you can sync the display to the Vision Pro, right? So there's all these integrations.
And before this, you could use the Apple Watch to not do the double tap gesture when you have the watch on or whatnot. But now there's this ability. It might have been there since day one. I've never tried to type something while wearing, but this is very neat and just a weird, discovery. Well, anything else regarding Spatial Personas before we wrap it up?
Well, I mean, but maybe I can just add like real quick that something I'm really interested in is how could the kind of spatial interactions that are shared in Vision Pro connect people like around the world. And so like I'm doing this like AirLingo language learning app on Vision Pro, and languages like we're using languages right now to communicate in this conversation. But now with SharePlay, I think that would be a really cool thing where you could learn languages with your friends, like in the shared, like visionOS setting. And especially that it's not just, like you're having a like Zoom class on a 2D screen where you're trying to like learn a language and it's a kind of like a 2D setting, but you're actually spatially in that space. So like right now with AirLingo, we already have like this like huge selection of several like virtual environments. Like you can be practicing Mandarin in this restaurant in Shanghai, and you're actually in this like a progressive immersive world in visionOS. But now imagine you could do that with other people through spatial personas, and that it wouldn't have the same impact if it was just the, like 2D FaceTime screens that float in visionOS, because then you're not really in the world. But I think that's why I'm interested in how this could be applied to virtual worlds like Airlingo, because now this, spatial presence that we have with our heads and our hands can make us more present in these virtual simulations of, not only the various the language learning environments that I have in the Airlingo app, but, all kinds of worlds. And I think that's part of where all spatial computing is going in the future.
Yeah. And as this technology gets more accessible, having a tutor with 4 students and whatnot would be very neat.
That would be awesome.
Immersion is the key to learning languages fast. Like everyone
Indeed.
says this, so.
But like studies say that the best way to learn a new language is to actually travel to that country. So I think that's what Vision Pro could provide, that in that social way. So, I don't know. We'll see where it goes in the future, but it's a really exciting tech for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me today, Rylan. And
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
anything else about this game before we move on to your next one?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think fully appreciate Mahjong is very niche in the States. But part of me does wonder, if it may have, it's sort of chess.com moment. The way I think about it is we're one Queen's Gambit equivalent away from this being popular. There are pockets of culture in the US where people are really, really into Mahjong. And there's a whole American Mahjong, which is kind of its own thing. So yeah, I'm excited to keep working on this project. Definitely not just gonna put it on the shelf, but it's just been eye-opening as a way to get into this world.
Very cool. And next up is the app that I've been on the test flight of checking out, is called Duel Space. And can you give me the kind of elevator pitch for this one?
Yeah. So that's a working title for this multiplayer physics-based card sandbox, and kind of unpacking what that means. So the concept ultimately is you'll be able to play any tabletop card-based game under the sun that you want to play with friends. So it'll also be fully multiplayer, over share play, probably do something with avatars down the road. But really trying to open things up a little bit. So I was very, very inspired by Game Room. I think they did an amazing job, knocked it out of the park around certain core basic interactions. But that's 5 games, right? And so I think there's this huge appetite within kind of the Vision Pro community to do more fun multiplayer experiences, give you more reasons to put on a headset and play the games that you want to play with friends. So trying to build this out to empower people to be able to do just that.
The name Duel Space, is that implying a 1v1, or could this open up to more people than just 1v1?
Yeah, so it's very much a working title. By the time it kind of makes its way to the App Store, it might be called something else entirely. But the premise here is multiplayer, probably in the 2 to 8 player range. So want to support something like a Texas Hold'em. So the way I see this going is there will probably be a handful of first party games that I've built out that are a bit more polished and kind of are pre-made and ready to go with the layout and all the entities configured for you. But kind of what was a big inspiration personally for this was harkening back to childhood. And when I was playing trading card games with my siblings and my friends growing up, that was kind of the dual element of this. So it's a little bit of a pun as well. So
you can play war in this, right?
Oh yeah. So yeah. So really, it's really a card sandbox. So anything with cards. If you can stick an image on a card, the sky's the limit, right?
It's a hand tracking gesture for when you slap on a table and then you have some effect a big bomb explodes. That could be cool, blast. Right? For some games that involve slapping,
Yep. So I want to see how far I can go with this. There is a lot of prior art out there. There's something called Tabletop Simulator, which was kind of big in the PC space. I feel like I really don't want to use the word metaverse, but it's this is kind of the ambition is for on a tabletop, whatever you can fit on a tabletop, the sky's the limit, and really an open-ended like from a user-generated content perspective, right? I want people to be able to build the games that they want to play in the headset, and then immediately get to play them with friends on the headset.
And have you considered, you mentioned there will be some built-in kind of experiences, like with Solitaire, a lot of the games will have, at least on like, Windows or Mac, they'll have these like highlighted areas where cards will go. Like a snapping mechanism for, I want these cards when I throw them to go in these certain kind of layouts.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the fine line that I'm trying to walk right now, interaction-wise. It's like you want enough physics that you can do really goofy stuff when you choose to, but for the games, once you have them set up, like we will have this concept of kind of zones that things will snap to very naturally. And trying to build up this whole gesture stack so that these interactions start to feel very natural. And you can do, like you can draw a full hand of cards pretty fast without a lot of headaches. And then, you can toss things down on the table, rotate them just the way that you want them, all that good stuff.
Yeah, and maybe even a way for players to design their own games and design the zones where cards snap to and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What's
this is
What's the experience like of actually holding a set of like 10 cards? And, in real life, it's a simple thing of like hiding and condensing them into a single file stack versus spreading them out in your hands a bit.
Yep. Yeah. So I have a fairly primitive kind of hand anchoring system right now where you can attach cards to your hands and then you can literally see them in your hand. But there is this whole like more subtle interaction that I'm working to get towards, where exactly like you're describing. So you kind of, as you move your thumb, the cards spread out and spread in, all that good stuff. This is the devil's in the details here, but I'm very excited about kind of pushing the frontier of interaction with this stuff.
And chips, I'd imagine, would be there for poker type games. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's this concept of you'll have kind of this repository of models that you can pull off from the side of the table and just kind of like spawn different entities into the game board. So things like dice, counters, chips, all that good stuff would be configurable for each game. And then you just kind of like pull them out, and then everyone's got their pile, and then some nice primitives for like managing piles of stuff if it gets a little bit unwieldy, and counting stuff. So striking that balance between, yes, it is physics, but also you can count things. Like you don't have to personally count them, or stack them or shuffle them. Yeah, it's been very, very fun to work on so far.
And then another thing you shared with me is there are these communities out there that have these card decks online, and you can actually download images of the card decks. Like Pokemon is out there as a card game. You can just download these images, and I believe you'll have some way of like, if you want to scan your own cards or get them however you want to get them, and you'll be able to input those into your app. And what's that experience going to look like, you think?
Yeah. So I'm trying to not get sued.
Yes.
But So this is goal number one. But
like emulators are legal, but it's not legal to ship the ROMs with them.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So I'll be building the emulator, I guess, in this metaphor. But there are so many great resources out there. I think, there is this affinity. People who love trading card games also happen to love making these wonderful like API services and stuff that you can hook into. So all that information is out there. Like there are these deck list formats and all this stuff. So I'm hopeful we can get like a nice pipeline going. Where people can do these sort of activities in private sessions with their friends, and have a really good time, like playing whatever card game they want to play. And I'm just gonna run with it and try and find some lawyers, and make sure I'm doing things by the book. But this is the concept. Yeah,
that's super cool. And then there were rumors that Apple Pencil is in the works for Vision Pro one day. And I was thinking, how cool would it be to use that to jot down scores on like a fake piece of paper for you, kind of thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that this kind of stuff really gets me going. Like there's so much. Once you have a sandbox, there's so much fun to be had within it. Yeah.
And then, how do you see this app being shipped? As like volumetric? Is it fully immersive? And I noticed when I tried to use it initially, I was in my cubby, like basically 2 walls right next to me in my chair, and it just didn't show anything because I was like in too close of a space. So,
yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of some early prototype shenanigans, I think. But yeah, it's similar to some learnings coming out of the Mahjong experience. I'll probably offer both a volume-based mode and then a more mixed immersive sort of mode of play. And yeah, I think it's nice to have the option, right, when you're in that more confined space. Yeah.
And something I think that will be interesting with spatial personas especially is if for poker and bluffing, if you'll be able to read like, facial expressions to...
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, I think that could be big. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna, like, hell or high water, like, this is the goal. I want to recreate that experience of
because
you're gathered around
online
the table with
poker
friends.
doesn't have that. You're just like, you're bluffing against no facial expressions. It's so different.
Yeah. There is this interesting element of, like, maybe the people who gravitate towards online poker prefer some of that, but I really want to recreate that in-person experience. And you get to see the tells of your buddies and be like, I think you're bluffing, man.
Yeah.
Like that's a big part of the game for me. So
yeah.
That is the goal.
Yeah, and if you're doing voice as well, I'd imagine you'd want to be doing that. You'll be able to look and see where they're talking from and stuff. That sounds great.
Yep. Yeah, spatial audio is wonderful.
Yeah.
On this device. Yeah.
So right now it's card games. Do you intend to expand it to like board games? Like there's generic versions of Monopoly out there, and other card game or board games potentially, or would that be a different app that focuses in on board games?
So potentially yes, but I think it's nice to, especially with something as open ended as this, to put some constraints on it from the early part. So that I can really nail those primitives. Because when you think of like all the stuff you need to do with a deck of things, like a stack, shuffling, all that stuff, there are so many games that involve cards that I want to just nail those interactions and then hopefully can broaden it from there. Yeah.
And then dice rolling, I imagine, would be a thing. And there's dice that are in that little cup thing sometimes. I don't know if you've looked at that.
Yeah. So I have physically based dice right now. And I think for the people who don't want to literally roll them, I'll probably offer a more turnkey kind of button-based interaction as well.
I wonder too, like dice by pCalc, if you could use to use a dice app within your app kind of thing. But you'd have to probably share play. You'd have to share play, I guess, both apps versus just the one.
This is a whole another level of maybe as this platform evolves, it's starting to see 3D interactions between apps. That could be very cool.
If there's you're at a bar and you have the TVs on in the background, share playing something on at the TV while you're playing at the same time. So doing multiple share plays at once during this kind of session would be interesting.
I think right now that the way Apple has it is kind of one takes priority.
Okay.
We did some experiments with sharing windows, and it seemed like I could be wrong, but right now at least it seemed like you could only do kind of one at a time. But hopefully that's a temporary thing.
Yeah. Speaking of which, WWDC is coming up pretty soon. What are some of the big holes in VisionOS you hope get filled at this one or soon?
I have a long wish list. I think some of it gets a little bit into the weeds, but happy to kind of talk about it at a high level. So I think some other folks mention as well. So right now, with the volumes, there is this weird tension and trade-off where volumes are so cool, but they're also kind of annoying because window management is kind of annoying. So I would love to see some snapping primitives for volumes themselves so that you could anchor a volume to a table and have it persist there. I think, a lot of folks want to see persistent workspaces, all that kind of stuff. This one is a little bit nuanced, but I think a lot of folks are a bit frustrated about the input system. When it comes down to those custom hand gestures we talked about, there's so much cool stuff that you can do once you have the raw hand input. But unfortunately, today, getting that input means that you have to do a immersive app so that it's it's like the moment that you want to do stuff with raw human input, your app is the only one running. But like when I think about this problem, at least from my naive, not knowing how things work internally these days, I feel like you could separate that. So, like,
it seems like whatever app you're looking at should just have that set of hand gestures. If you look at a different app, it adopts that set of hand gestures.
Yeah, or like there is kind of there's a divide between like wanting to render stuff on your hands and just wanting the input. So like I totally get why, it's a big problem if you have two apps both competing to try to render stuff on top of your hands.
Yeah, like having a wristwatch or something on your hand virtually. Right.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. But like if I wanted to do what would otherwise be actually a volume-based app, but I just want to do, fun custom hand gestures, like I feel like I should be able to do that as a developer. I don't know.
No, I agree.
And then, we talked about spatial personas. I'm so excited to see those go out the door. Even if we don't have legs, I'd be okay with not having legs for a while, like just to have that at all. And then there is this kind of funny gap in the ecosystem. So, when AR on iOS was kind of first launched and broadcast, and, there were several WWDCs. Where they kept adding more cool stuff.
Many years, yes.
Yeah. Many years of demos that we kind of waded through, right? And we're like, this is cool, but what about on a headset? Is I think a lot of folks' impression of that. A funny thing that happened is like ARKit on iOS is so much further along now than what you get on visionOS. And it feels ironic. It's like, wait, weren't you guys building this for this headset? One area especially that comes to mind is I get it in the sense that like this is going to be a rare thing for several years to come. But like this concept of co-located co-presence. So like, that future where you have multiple people in the same room wearing headsets and able to interact with the same objects in a shared space physically, I think is very, very exciting. And the funny thing is, like, all of those primitives exist on iOS, and they have for years now. Like, as a developer, we've been able to do these cool, like, multiplayer experiences where you all have the same global shared space. On visionOS, like, Apple has not shipped that stuff. It is not supported on this platform. And it seems like, I don't know what's going on there. Maybe there's something even better coming just around the river bend, but I would love to see that happen, even if it is going to be quite rare in practice to have two Vision Pro owners in the same room for a while. The last one that, at least for me, like, so, there are all these questions around camera access and like, that big privacy concern coupled with all of the potential of what you could do if you did have camera access. But for me, like, I don't mind, like, it's fine, whatever. I get it. Like, as a consumer, I value like the privacy and that someone's not streaming like my house to some server somewhere when I open an app. But on the flip side, so in terms of workarounds that the platform can offer, one of the basic building blocks that Apple has given us is these image tracking primitives. So, you can load up some 2D image into the system and ask it to look for that object, right? And my understanding is like, when you have the overlay on your keyboard and maybe to some extent like that little connect augment that appears when you do the pairing with your Mac, like that relies on this system or something like this system, right? But as a developer right now, unfortunately, like, this API, like on paper, it sounds awesome. You're like, this is so cool. Like, like all this stuff I want to do with cards, right? Like with physical cards. Like I'm going to load up all these cards and the system is just going to take care of it. That sounds awesome. But in practice, unfortunately, today, this is not like prioritized by the operating system. And like what happens is like objects are detected a bit slowly in the first place. And then once they are detected, I think the expectation is that they're stationary. So like if you were to move it, it runs around 1 frame per second. So like as a user, you're like, I moved it, but it's over there still. So I really hope to see some performance optimization there, and that that would really unlock a whole new like level of use cases of true like augmented reality experiences in the world, which I think would be very, very compelling. And I think a lot of developers are hyped about that stuff, but they, then they try it and they're like, okay, I guess not today.
Yeah.
Like maybe next year. Yeah,
I even know that was a feature in the OS. That's cool to know.
Yeah.
That's there.
Oh yeah. There's so many cool like breadcrumbs, of things that are soon to be viable, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anything else about visionOS or Apple Vision Pro that we haven't covered before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think I guess we've gone for a bit. One last thing that maybe want to just remark on is I think like as an industry, I don't know. I'm a relatively young guy still, I guess, but there is this aspect of like we do forget history, kind of like as technologists or whatever. Like VR has a really, really rich history to draw upon. Like people have been trying to do this stuff for like 50 years, at this point, a little bit longer. Like, the first VR headset was a research project in 1968, right? Like people have been trying to solve these problems for a very long time. And I think it does serve us to, like, there's a lot to draw upon, like for inspiration, in terms of best practices, acknowledging things that are still yet to be solved. So we talked a little bit about this very briefly, but like this problem of, vergence and accommodation. So like, yeah, it is true. Like if you place objects too close to you in a headset today, it'll feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And like,
and it's not great for your eyes either physically.
Yeah. So hopefully, some very focal headset ships to consumers, within the next 3 years or something, right? Like, but we're still not there. So it's like, okay, we gotta be crafty. We gotta design things that take advantage of what is good enough and then try to, paper over the gaps to the extent that we can. And it's really an exciting time. Feel very lucky to be just like part of what's going on in this space. And just to acknowledge that it's going to take time. Like, this is going to be
OS
like a
10. Yes.
Yeah. And just like to feel okay about that. And like, it's going to be niche for a while and that's okay. And like, we can have a lot of fun, make a lot of mistakes, build a lot of cool stuff. And then hopefully by the time the market kind of catches up with the dream, we'll all be ready to make the most of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it is, very exciting times. Excited for what's going to be unveiled in June. And, I'm still wondering if I should install a beta on my headset. We'll see.
Oh yeah. That's, I don't want to break this thing. Yeah,
I know.
That's a big concern.
Yeah. Anyways, well, thank you so much, Ethan, for your time. Where can people follow you and learn more about the apps that you create? Yeah,
so I think, unfortunately, still the best bet for now is Twitter or X or whatever. We're calling it next week. But so it's my last name, which is Sherbondy. So that's Sherbondy. That's probably your best bet for now. We're working on a lot of things, trying to get these test flights out the door.
Very cool.
Hopefully, we'll have a playable build of Duel Space ready by the time this podcast is live.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a great chat, and I think we've gone on for another 2 or 3 hours. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
Well, that's been an interview with Ethan. My thanks to Ethan for his time recording, and thanks to you for your time, attention, tuning in. Make sure to check out Mahjong Space in the visionOS App Store and be on the lookout for Duel Space coming soon. As a reminder, you can support the podcast over at visionpros.fm/Patreon. My thanks to everyone that supports the show. With that, I'll talk to everyone again real soon.